Hello and welcome to this week's YouTube video. This week I thought I'd show you how I painted this yellow Labrador. Dealing with those yellow hues convincingly can be quite tricky, so let's get into the video and I will speak about my process as I go along. I am painting on a 10 by 12 inch canvas board. I've covered it with a wash of ultramarine deep plus transparent yellow oxide and Gamsol to give it a warmish hue. I let it dry and then lightly draw my dog onto the canvas. The reason why painting a golden lab is so tricky is because the temperatures and values tend to be quite similar. Let's deal with temperature first. Let me show you my palette. I am using cadmium yellow light, yellow ochre light, transparent yellow oxide, cadmium red, alizarin crimson, transparent red oxide, ultramarine deep and titanium zinc white. I've mixed up a black red and a black green. When I mix these two together, it gives me my black, which can be warm or cool. I've mixed up a purple, two oranges and a lighter green. The most important thing to understand about this palette is which colours are warm, which colours are cool and which colours are transitionary, i.e. they can be both warm and cool. I also need to understand where my colours sit on the colour wheel. I will be using the complementaries of firstly yellow and purple to paint this dog. I will be using my purple to neutralise my yellow and mixing it into my yellows in various quantities. If I mix yellow and purple in equal quantities, I will get a sort of brown. If I add white to this mix, it will give me a grey. White will cool down any colour you add it to. Notice I have 3 yellows on my palette, and I will be using them all. Cadmium yellow light is my most saturated yellow. It sits here on the colour wheel. It is my coolest yellow. Yellow ochre light sits about here, and it's warmer than cadmium yellow. Transparent yellow oxide is the warmest and darkest yellow on my palette. Because it is transparent, it doesn't really affect the value if I mix it with dark colours, so it is great for warm darks. If I show you these 3 yellows side by side, mixed with my purple and a little white, you will be able to see the difference in the temperatures. You'll see that this yellow is much cooler than the other 2. And if I push my purple closer to a blue purple, it pushes this neutral closer to a cool green. This will give me these cool tones you see in the shaded area on the left side. And I can push it even cooler with my blue in these areas where I'm getting the reflected light from the carpet. The second complementary pairing I will be using is orange and blue. If I mix blue and orange together, I will get a brown. I have 2 oranges on my palette. This one is my warmest, most saturated orange. I'll use this one where I really need to push the warmth and colour, for example in the areas on the back and body, plus the ears too. I have the option of mixing my orange with either my blue, or if I want something a little warmer, I can use my green. This orange is still quite warm, but it is not as saturated as this one. It gives me more of a caramel brown colour. If I mix this one with my greens or blues, the colour will not be as strong. It will be much more muted, so it will be better for these areas around the nose where I want more subtle colour transitions. If I mix more cadmium red into my purple, it will give me the brown for that nose and also the underside of the paws. It looks really warm because I have laid it next to blue. Remember, blue is my coolest colour. So when I look at my reference photo, I ask myself, is the fur warm or cool? If it is warm, I will be using one of my yellows or oranges. If it is cool, I will be using one of my blues or purples. The reality is that all my yellows will be carrying some purple and all my oranges will be carrying some blue. Even that carpet is carrying a little yellow, a little purple and a little blue that I have laid in a broken colour effect just to make it a little more interesting. If you would like to know more about broken colour, have a look at this video on my channel. Now I have explained my warm-cool palette, let's talk about value. The colours I have on my palette to control my value is my black, which can be warm or cool, and my white. White is always cool and will cool down any colour I mix it with. If I am trying to mix warm whites, I will need to add one of my yellows or perhaps an orange. Don't forget also that all the colours on my palette carry their own value, so think about the most appropriate colour to use for lightening or darkening. Think about how your colour choice will affect your temperature. If I turn this painting into black and white, you'll see areas that are all very similar in value. Painting in blocks of colour will help you avoid over-modelling. Over-modelling occurs where you misjudge your values by focusing in on small areas one at a time and exaggerating the difference between your lights and darks. You are left with a patchwork painting that loses the 3D effect because the relationship between the larger values no longer works. To avoid falling into this trap, I start off covering this painting in a thin layer of paint where I am guessing approximate values in colour. I don't use any medium. It is much easier for me to start judging what colours I am looking at once I have some paint down. Once I have covered the painting, I go back in for a second layer. Working section by section is then easier. I will block in areas that I think are really similar in value and colour. Let's take the face as an example. Excluding the nose and eyes, the fur is all very similar. So I will block in one colour that I think is the average value. I'll use a flat synthetic brush as it lays the paint well. I will then take my comber brush and begin to adjust my colours to take into account a darkening value and a changing temperature. My comber brush is very soft and long, and it allows me to brush wet paint onto wet paint without pulling off the paint underneath. I will need to overcompensate though on the colours I mix because they will be slightly affected by the colours underneath. So I may have to mix a little darker or a little warmer or a little cooler than my reference photo. Laying the painting this way gives a really soft effect and really suits the glossy fur well. It is also a much easier and quicker way to work. I do exactly the same for the legs, covering them in an approximate value, and then I begin to adjust my temperatures and also my values, depending upon what I see in the reference photo. I am making sure that every area that I paint is surrounded by an area where the paint is wet. Taking the leg as an example, I will make sure that this area is wet, this area is wet, and this area is wet. This will then allow me to pull my edges into each other and helps me avoid hard edges. If you would like to know more about the importance of edges in oil painting, then have a look at this video on my channel. And here it is, the finished painting. I hope you have enjoyed today's video and found it useful. Please like and subscribe if you can, and check out my website sarahhallidayart.com, where you will find examples of my work and also details of online classes that I run. Thank you for watching and see you for the next one.